They never called it a summit. Not when the iron doors clanged shut, sealing the room like a vault. Not when the wine was poured, thick, black, glistening like tar under the chandelier's sickly glow. Not when the aides, translators, and grim-faced military handlers were dismissed with smiles that cut like knives. The air turned heavy, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. 8 world leaders sat at the table: presidents, prime ministers, chancellors, the architects of peace, the sculptors of war. And then, for the first time in history, there was a 9th. William Shaw wasn't supposed to be there. A scheduler, a shadow in a suit, trained to nudge the president out of small talk or adjust the lights to soften the exhaustion on a powerful face. Not important enough to be remembered. Not invisible enough to be ignored. As the room emptied, 8 pairs of eyes, cold, unblinking, predatory, locked onto him. The American president tilted his head, lips curling into a smile that didn't move the rest of his face. Shaw was told to stay. His heart stuttered. He would spend the rest of his life wondering if that moment had been their mistake, or his test. The room was a mausoleum of power, high ceilings carved with faded sigils that seemed to shift when stared at too long. Lacquered oak walls, polished to a mirror sheen, reflected the flicker of a single chandelier. Thick velvet curtains swallowed sound, leaving only the faint clink of crystal glasses and a low hum, like a heartbeat, pulsing through the floor. Shaw stood by the sideboard, clutching his clipboard, its edges biting into his palms. The wine smell hit him. Bitter, metallic, wrong. He tried to blend into the shadows, but their eyes kept finding him, brief and sharp like pins pricking skin. At first, their words were veiled, coded phrases about pressure points, swelling tides, the long harvest. Shaw scribbled notes, pretending to be busy, but his pen froze as the masks fell. They had forgotten he was there, or they wanted him to hear. The Chancellor of the European bloc hissed that Winter Veil was ahead of schedule. Grain roots would freeze by March, and famine would sweep the South by summer. The Eastern Federation delegate traced a finger along his glass, the black liquid rippling, and spoke of the hourglass curve tightening. Lives stretched to burden the young, despair doing the rest. The British Prime Minister praised the elegance of a new waterborne strain. Slow to show, perfect for control. They weren't ruling the world. They were pruning it. A map unrolled across the table. No borders, no names, just colors bleeding into each other like wounds. Red for panic zones, riots sparked with a single leak. Yellow for sickness, where their viruses festered. Blue for migration corridors, funneling millions like cattle. Black for regions already expired. The black zones were spreading, swallowing entire nations. Shaw's stomach churned as he saw his hometown, Cold Bridge, marked in inky black. They spoke of disasters like artists discussing a canvas, floods nudged with weather tech, blamed on climate, economic levers pulled to crush classes, dressed up as market crashes, viruses tweaked to linger just long enough to empty hospitals and fill graves. Each catastrophe was a victory, a harvest of bodies, a tightening of chains. Then the American president shifted tone, calm, calculating, and spoke of the prior kind. Not human, not entirely. A splinter in the human tree, older than empires, sharper than steel. They were nearly wiped out millennia ago, by fire, by faith, by a forgotten war in a city of ash. A few thousand survived, hiding in plain sight, playing clumsy while their minds carved the world like surgeons. They saw modern humans as insects, loud, breeding, needy, clogging the earth with their dreams. The swarm was too large. It must be thinned. He described their dynasties, changeling minds seated in thrones, banks, revolutions, their archives, books bound in skin, hidden beneath cathedrals and embassies, chronicling every cull. The Black Death, a crafted purge, the Great Famine, a test, every war, every crash, every plague, a brushstroke in their endless painting. They weren't cruel, just gardeners, tending a world choked by weeds. Shaw's breath caught, a ragged gasp he prayed they didn't hear. His back hit the door, the knob cold against his spine. Their eyes flicked to him, amused, unhurried, like wolves watching a rabbit limp. They let him leave, but not freely. He didn't run. He slipped out, silent, into the night. The hotel's marble halls felt alive. Shadows too long, air too thick. He stumbled to his room, locked the door, and sat in the dark. Their words looped in his skull. The map, the colors, the prior kind. He saw their faces in every headline. Floods in Asia, riots in Europe. A new virus creeping through the Americas. All planned, all theirs. The guilt grew teeth, gnawing at his chest. He tried to stay silent, to pretend he'd misheard. But the map haunted his dreams. Red, yellow, blue, black, spreading like a bruise across the world. He saw his sister's face, his neighbors, his city, all marked for pruning. He broke. He told his sister, who called it a breakdown. He told a journalist, who ran it as a quirky human interest piece. He told a podcaster, who turned it into an episode titled, "The G8 Lizard People." No one believed him. The story flared online for a week. Memes, threads, a few conspiracy nuts calling him a hero. Then it vanished. Posts deleted. Videos scrubbed. Emails bounced. He kept trying. Letters to senators. Shouts at motorcades. A blog that lasted 3 days before it was hacked to pieces. Each night, he checked his locks twice, convinced he heard footsteps in the hall. Then the men in gray coats came. They didn't knock. They were just there. Faces smooth and forgettable. They spoke softly, called him unwell, and drove him to a place where the walls were soft and the lights never flickered. They called it a hospital. It felt like a cage. Now he lives in a quiet place, padded walls, dim fluorescent hum, timetables carved into his days, pills that blur the hours and dull the edges of fear. They call him stable. They don't let him leave. Most days he forgets his name. But some nights, when the air thickens and the silence hums like a living thing, he remembers. They gave him a recorder, said it was for therapy. He grips it like a lifeline, whispering into the static. They're not aliens, not demons, just older, sharper, a deviation, a holdover, a predator class, pretending to be human for long enough to win. They embedded themselves in every system, every failure, ran simulations of collapse, then made them real. Floods seeded with stolen tech, viruses tested in hospitals with locked doors, riots lit by a single tweet, perfectly timed. Every headline, their war, not between nations, between types of human. He says he's not alone. Others in the facility have brushed the veil. A pilot who saw a craft vanish into restricted airspace. A data analyst who traced every famine spike to a fuel shortage, always 12 weeks apart. A teacher whose brightest students disappeared, their records wiped clean. Some wear blank smiles now, eyes like glass. Some scream when the lights dim, clawing at the walls like they could dig through to truth. They all know something's wrong. One night, Shaw scratched a map into the frame of his bed. Red, yellow, blue, black. He whispered messages into the recorder, hoping someone, somewhere, would hear. He found a crack in the wall, slipped a folded note inside. "They're pruning us. Resist." The next day, the crack was sealed. The note was gone. Last night, everything changed. A new patient arrived. Her eyes were sharp, her hands trembling but deliberate. She sat across from him, silent, and slipped a paper into his palm beneath the table. One word: resist. Beneath it a map, no borders, just colors. And one zone, tiny, unmarked, wasn't black. It glowed faintly, a speck of white, like a spark in the dark. She leaned close, her breath hot against his ear. They had missed one. Shaw's heart raced. He hid the paper in his sleeve, his mind clawing through the fog of pills. Was this a trap? Another test by the prior kind? Or was it real? A crack in their perfect plan? He doesn't know. But he records it all. Every word, every color, every hum in the walls that feels like their eyes. Maybe the ones they call mad are simply the ones who remember.